In the first chapter, the very first chapter of Liberty and Tyranny, I address the problem that the Republican Party faces today, without calling it the Republican Party. Because I think we would have this problem whether there was a Republican Party or not. The statists and the neo-statists. The neo-statists. Now, the problem is, well, here's what I say in part. The statist knows that despite his successful usurpations, enough citizens are still skeptical and even distrustful of politicians and government that he cannot force his will all at once. Thus, he marches in incremental steps, adjusting his pace as circumstances dictate. You've heard people discuss this, haven't you? Well, this came out a year and a half ago. Today, his pace is more rapid, for resistance has slowed. And at no time does the statist do an about-face. But not so with some who claim the mantle of conservatism, but are, in truth, neo-statists, who would have the conservative abandon the high ground of the founding principles for the quicksand of soft tyranny. Michael Gerson, formerly chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush, has written in his book Heroic Conservatism that, quote, if Republicans run in future elections with a simplistic anti-government message, ignoring the poor, the addicted, and children at risk, they will lose and they will deserve to lose, Gerson argues, for a compassionate conservatism. I'm quoting him, and faith-based initiatives in which the federal government plays a central role. But Gerson all but ignores liberty's successes in the civil society in which humans flourish, even though he's surrounded in his every moment by its magnificence. So numerous are liberty's treasures that they defy cataloging. The object of Gerson's scorn is misplaced. Gerson does not ask how many enterprises and jobs might have been created, how many people might have been saved from illness and disease, how many more poor children might have been fed but for the additional costs, market dislocations, and management inefficiencies that distort supply and demand or discourage research and development as a result of the federal government's role. Liberty's permeance in American society often makes its manifestations elusive or invisible to those born into it. Even if liberty is acknowledged, it is, often taken for granted and its permanence assumed. Therefore, under these circumstances, the statist's agenda can be alluring even to a former advisor to a Republican president. It's not recognized as an increasingly corrosive threat to liberty, but rather as coexisting with it. I continue what I wrote in the first chapter. Columnists William Crystal and David Brooks promote something called national greatness conservatism. They co-authored an opinion piece in which they exclaim that it does not despise government. How could it? How can Americans, they wrote, love their nation if they hate its government? By the way, to restore faith in our government is to slash its flabbiness while making it more effective, unquote. I said the conservative does not despise government. He despises tyranny. This is precisely why the conservative reveres the Constitution and insists on adherence to it. The conservative is alarmed by the ascent of a soft tyranny and its cheery acceptance by the neo-statist. Did I not call these people, or did I not? He knows that liberty once lost is rarely recovered. He knows of the decline and eventual failure of past republics. And he knows that the best prescription for addressing society's real and perceived ailments is not to further empower an already enormous federal government beyond its constitutional limits, but to return to the founding principles. A free people living in a civil society, working in self-interested cooperation, and a government operating within the limits of its authority promote more prosperity, opportunity, and happiness for more people than any alternative. Conservatism is the antidote to tyranny, precisely because its principles are the founding principles. Do we have time, Mr. Producer? Now, here is Karl Rove yesterday. When the final election results come in Delaware, O'Donnell is declared the winner before she even gives her victory speech. I'm going to let you listen to every damn word of it. This is a neo-statist. on the Hannity Show. Cut one, go.
All right, your reaction, first we had Alaska, Murkowski loses. You had Rand Paul beat the establishment candidate, Sharon Angle. Now it's Delaware. Your reaction?
Yeah. Well, look, all the rest of them are explainable. In Murkowski versus in the Alaska race, you had a long-time feud between two factions of the party. In Kentucky, you had a good candidate versus a candidate who had no message. In Nevada, you had a candidate who sort of self-immolated herself, and another candidate who had a consistent message. This is the inexplicable one, because Christine O'Donnell has come on here at the very end of the campaign, and there's a huge turnout tonight in Delaware. The total was estimated to be 30,000 people going into the primary, and it's come out 56,000, and she has dealt a defeat to one of the state's longest and best known and thought to be most beloved political figures, a former governor and 9-term Republican congressman in Mike Castle. So this is the one that's unusual, because this is not a campaign that has been going on for a year where you had one candidate who was consistently doing better as a candidate than the other, as in the case of Rand Paul, and there were not deep sort of family and tribal disputes as we had in Alaska between Miller and Murkowski, and we didn't have a candidate who committed suicide, political suicide, by saying things that got him in trouble with the voters. Instead, we have a true upset of somebody with little money, little track record, and I think this really says that this is more about Mike Castle's voting record than about the appeal of Christine O'Donnell.
I'm not sure if I agree with you. I think there's a battle going on with what we define as the establishment, where we're talking about with Dana and Stewart, and those that are taking strong conservative views. I mean, Mike Castle was one of the 7 or 8 Republicans in the House that voted for cap and tax, heading with the NRA. He's not pro-life, and you have the establishment over the years. Look who they backed: Arlen Specter, Charlie Crist, Murkowski. They didn't support Rand Paul, Sharon Angle.
That would be Rove.
There seems to be a schism here. There seems to be a divide.
Well, look, I'm not certain of this, because, look, there were conservatives on both sides of this race in Delaware. And one thing that Christine O'Donnell is now going to have to answer in the general election that she didn't have to answer in the primary is her own checkered background. You made my case. You made out a list of the things that Mike Castle had done right, or excuse me, done wrong. You didn't make out a list of the things that Christine O'Donnell had done right. I've met her. I've got to tell you, I wasn't frankly impressed as her abilities as a candidate. And again, these serious questions about how did she make her living, why did she mislead voters about her college education, how come it took her nearly 2 decades to pay her college bills so she could get her college degree, how did she make a living, why did she sue a well-known and well-thought-of conservative think tank?
This is probably one of the few times we're going to disagree here, because I've met her, I've interviewed her a lot over the years, I've found her quite impressive. And more importantly, she is a solid conservative. And I think what people are saying in this primary, in this race, and I think all across the country in these other races that we're mentioning here, is that, you know what, if you vote for cap and tax, and an opponent that says they wouldn't, then they have a choice. They have an option. So I think it was very substantive, very based on issues, very based on the voting record of one and the promised voting record of another.
Again, you're making my case. This was about Mike Castle's bad votes. It does conservatives little good to support candidates who, at the end of the day, while they may be conservative in their public statements, do not evince the characteristics of rectitude and truthfulness and sincerity and character that the voters are looking for. And we'll see how she can answer these questions. She sure as heck didn't answer them thus far in the campaign. And now in the general election, she will be asked about it.
I interviewed her, and I felt her explanations were far more plausible than was
Did you ask her about the people who are following her home to her headquarters and how she's checked each
They
night
were.
in the bushes? Did you ask her? I mean, there are just a lot of nutty things she's been saying that just simply don't add up to it.
It sounds like you don't support her, but I will tell you, I think
I'm for the Republican, but I got to tell you, we were looking at 8 to 9 seats in the Senate. We're now looking at 7 to 8, in my opinion. This is not a race we're going to be able to win. In my opinion.
You may be right in the end. I don't know, and we can look into our crystal ball and can say things. I would just argue back to you gently that I don't think we can make progress in stopping the Obama agenda with rhino Republicans that are not going to be there when the solid votes are needed.
I agree, but we also can't make progress if we have candidates who've got serious character problems that cause ordinary voters who are not philosophically aligned with us to not vote for our candidates out of concerns about what they said.
I think one of the problems, though, too, is we've sent people to Washington, forgot why we sent them there, and they got fat and lazy and out of control, and they're paying a price.
Absolutely.
And they should pay a price.
And in 2006, we had people who had really violated the people's trust by engaging in acts of corruption, which is why the Democrat culture of corruption theme was so powerful in 2006.
I don't even hear one allegation that begins to compare to Charlie Rangel or William Jefferson or anything like that.
That's not a very good defense. These seem to be
trumped-up charges, from my standpoint, that the Republican establishment was throwing against her, which by the way, violated whatever happened to Reagan's 11th Amendment.
I agree, but look, she attacked him by saying that he'd had a homosexual relationship at a young age.
That's a flat-out lie.
With not a bit of evidence to prove it.
I heard the tape,
and she made a lot of these things.
She said in that interview that she was not making that accusation.
Well,
I heard the tape in the very interview.
That was the second interview. She'd already previously spread the rumor. I mean, come on. I mean, look, she's got to. We'll see how well. Let you and I have a private side bet on this one. But I think that at the end of the day, she's going to have to answer these questions in a way that the people of Delaware find convincing, or we're going to find ourselves with somebody who says conservative things but doesn't have the character that the people of Delaware want to have back it up. See.
I have never in my life of 40 years in the conservative movement and observing politics and in many instances involved in political campaigns heard anything like that after a primary battle. Never. And I'm telling you that almost to a man and a woman, Reaganites wouldn't do that. This is sleazy. She just won. And he is kneecapping her for the general election. Intentionally. He's intentionally sabotaging her campaign. Well, they're going to bring these things up, so let me tick them off for you, and I can be in a commercial. Here we go. Boom, 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 boom. And I can answer a number of these. I don't know everything about all of them. But for a lot of us, the vast majority of this is irrelevant. Oh, it's a character issue. Really? When the left pulled that slimy trick against George Bush for Al Gore with the DUI thing, we were all disgusted by that. Disgusted by that, and we should have been. All these guys and gals have stuff going on with themselves and their family. All these critics throwing bricks from these various websites and so forth, unless they're all perfect human beings, they've never had financial issues. They've never smoked pot. By the way, I never have. They've never done this, that, or the other. Digging and digging and digging like this? For what? What's the purpose? Because the Democrats are going to do it? Does that make sense to you? This was sleazy. Sleazy. Now, we now know that Karl Rove also met with the Tea Party activists. And he tried to get them to support Castle. Hat tip to Right Scoop and to Wilkow, my buddy over there at Sirius Satellite. This guy's name is John Sherman. John Sherman. Listen to this. Cut 2, go.
Well, I've been listening to TV today, and there's a lot of folks talking about Christine's chances of winning in November, and I hear Karl Rove's getting on her pretty heavy. About a year ago, Karl Rove came to Delaware for a Republican thing, and he asked for a private meeting with the Tea Party groups, the grassroots groups, and we went and sat down with him. And he tried to convince us how we needed to get behind the party and how we needed to get behind a candidate that was electable. And, of course, that candidate... We did. Well, the one he was talking about didn't make it, but... I interrupted Mr. Rove and I said, sir, with all due respect, we won't endorse a party. He said, what I really want to do is tell you folks how to work with the candidate and how to get things done. And I said, sir, with all due respect, no one is going to tell us how to take care of business.